All right, welcome back and Happy New Year. And we are finally back. Most of the people are out of my house and I have some time where there's no noise where I can make some new videos. And my biggest pet peeve for 2020 was one click this, one click that. On this channel, I am trying to be honest and straightforward and give you the truth about toning as a photographer inside of Photoshop. There was a big trend of this one-click clickbait, and believe me, there are some aspects where you could create an action or do a cool little effect with one click. However, the idea that you can tone an image with one click is just absolutely ridiculous. It's not that easy. I know people want to get the program and do really cool things straight away with it. It just doesn't work that way. I teach photography in a college and I see students, the first time they usually tone stuff, it's really bad. They think it looks good, but it's actually not toned correctly. Colors off, contrast is too high. They just don't know where an image should be. And over the years, I've learned that yes, a good exposure is going to have a global adjustment, a small global adjustment, but most aspects of an image are what's called selective adjustments, where you're going over here into this area or this area and either lightening or darkening a specific aspect. Now, even if you were to create an action to do something, it doesn't work perfectly for every single image. You still need to go into the action and make adjustments for each individual image. Then we have autotone. Autotone does not work. It's pretty much the most useless function inside of Photoshop. Now you can click on it. Occasionally it will work, but if you see any dramatic change, it's usually not going to work. And the problem with autotone is it tries to set white, which you should pretty much never do. And it tries to set what we call specular white, or like white without any detail. So 255, 255, 255, that's white without any detail. Well, in a photograph, you don't usually want that in case it is an image like this where maybe there isn't any detail because it's overexposed in the background. We usually want to hold highlight detail, and setting white is automatically going to blow your brightest white out and give it no detail, which is something that you definitely do not want to do. Setting black can also cause problems. It usually makes your image too dark and contrasty, and what happens is your shadow areas tend to get muddy. So I'm going to go over 3 different images, all shot at the same location, and we're going to show how basically these all need to be toned separately. And you're going to notice that the majority of the adjustments that I do, and I'm just going to do this really simply, are going to be selective adjustments where I'm just tackling a base area. What we're going to do is I'm going to hit Command E, and this is Photo Mechanic, and we're just sending the images over here to Adobe Camera Raw. Now, yes, I know everybody has hated the new update. There's nothing I can do about it. You know, this is where it is at this point. So we're going to be using the new update, even though people can't stand it. So I have all 3 of my images here, and nothing has been done to them at this point. Now, the first setting that we're going to look at is I'm actually going to set all mine to standard just because I like that better. It's a little bit flatter, has a little less contrast, and I tend to not like super saturated items. And yes, I do know that I could do this all at one time by selecting the images, but it's a tutorial, so we're going to show you what I'm doing. All right, so we're going to start at this image first right here. And what we're going to do is, and this is probably going to work the best out of all these, we're going to go ahead and apply autotone. So for autotone, we've got auto up here. We're going to go ahead and click that. And you can see it did make a small adjustment and it did some stuff. But see right here, this is what I call drastic adjustments, where you have like wild swings. You usually do not want wild swings. You also don't want to be changing your vibrance and your saturation most of the time in Adobe Camera Raw. This is something that we should be doing later on, because what this is going to cause is a lot of color casting and color issues that need to be fixed. You can see right here, it made her like super greenish yellow and it looks freaking weird. So we're going to undo that. So I'm just going to hold the Option key and come down here and hit reset and hit yes. We want to do that. So you can see that color cast is gone. Look, she should be dark shadow. There's no reason to try to open that up. We want her as a silhouette here in this image. And we don't need any detail back here because there isn't any detail. So we want to hold like highlight detail here. That's where it's important. And we don't want this black dog to get too dark. And you can see it's already way too contrasty. So even in an image with specular white and what we would assume would be a black, it just did not do a good job. So we're going to come to the next image. We're going to go ahead and hit auto. And this one worked a little bit better. Actually, it's not too bad. However, it is a little bit too contrasty at this point. You'll hear me call tone flat. If you increase the contrast in the beginning and then you have an highlight area that you want to dark, notice how bright this is compared to here. It just has to do with the way the light is hitting it. I don't want this to be that bright because we want the focus of the area to be in here. So we want to dumb this down a little bit. If we increase the contrast, it makes it difficult to darken this. When you're trying to darken something, you actually want to lower the contrast, not increase the contrast. Notice we also have some wild swings here. We're going to get rid of those again. So we're going to go ahead and hit reset and get that back down so it's much flatter and even. And we'll come into this last one here. We're going to go ahead and hit auto. And here's where you can see that auto really blowing out the highlights of the hair up here. That's just way too bright. And that's going to show up as just a big white bright area with no detail in it. So we definitely don't want to do it. And you can see how wild some of these swings are. This is something that we want to stay away from. So once again, I'm going to hit reset and we're going to leave it there. Now, is it too dark here? Yep. All right. The problem is in photography, you're going to make a global adjustment. So in this, what's my global adjustment? I'm actually going to flatten this out. So I'm going to lower my contrast, right? So notice how as you lower, it flattens that image out. If you go this way, it's increasing the contrast. Now, the reason I want to lower that contrast is because I want to be able to open up or bring out the shadow areas. Once again, if you increase the contrast, it's going to make it more difficult to open up the shadow area. So we're going to lower that. Then we're going to take those shadows and we're going to open those up so they're not so contrasty. So the more we go this way, the more we're going to open up those shadows. Now, this is a global adjustment. And what you need to remember with these global adjustments is you don't want to open it up so this area or this area looks good, but then you ruin this area or this area. It's okay in this image, but you don't want to make a global adjustment where it looks good in one area and messes up another. In that case, you just want to stop and you want to make what's called a selective adjustment, and then we can apply it to a specific area. So in this case, you notice we are opening up her and we're starting to get that green and it's not looking good. So in this case, I'm actually going to lower that shadow down. Is it opening it up enough here? No, but it's brightening this area up too much and I don't want to do that. So in this case, that image, we're just going to stop there. I'm going to do these sequentially. We're going to go ahead and leave the color balances. Normally I would come in here. I actually click on auto and get stuff. I tend to like things to be a little bit neutral. Some people like things a little bit warmed up. It's not that important. What we're looking at here is this kind of one-click mentality that you can just come over here and click one button like this and it's going to tone it perfectly. That just doesn't exist. Okay, can a guy on a video find the perfect single image where you can just click it once and then it looks like it's working? Yeah, but it doesn't work in real life. That being said, toning an image doesn't need to be this difficult either. So we're going to do very simple adjustments in this. We're not going to over or micro tone something to make it perfect. We're just going to do some basic simple toning. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to put this on standard just because I like standard. And once again, what are we going to do? So what we're going to do is we're going to darken some areas and we're going to open up some areas. But in a global adjustment, this image doesn't seem to be real contrasty. So I'm just actually going to open this up a little bit here and I'm going to stop. Maybe I can increase the brightness just a hair. I'm watching this area up here that I don't get it too bright in this area, but that looks pretty good. This area got a little bit brighter, but I think we're going to be able to darken that down. So this is something you could or couldn't do. It wasn't a big adjustment. And then we have this image here. Once again, not a big fan of color, so we're going to go to standard. I could do my color balance if I wanted. That is a little bit too cool. So we're just gonna make that there, and we're gonna go ahead. Now notice we got some highlights. So remember, as we're opening up this, we don't wanna make it too bright because we're gonna blow out that area. Remember, global adjustment, small adjustment. And we're gonna lower the contrast, and we're gonna open up the shadows. And that looks pretty good. And this is normal. My global adjustments are usually really small. Why? Well, because I usually have my exposures exactly where I want them. If your exposures are off, you're gonna have to make more dramatic adjustments. But these are pretty close to good. And I tend to, yes, shoot a little bit dark on the dark side. That's just because I like that style. I'm trying to hold my highlight values, and it's easier to open up shadow areas. All right, so we're gonna go back to this image. And we're gonna switch this over to standard. I don't know how that got off, but that's okay. So we've got standard, everything looks good. And now we're gonna come over here and click on that adjustment brush. And we are now in selective editing. And what this is gonna allow us to do is make an adjustment and then apply it to a specific area. If I wanted to darken this, and I'm gonna explain why you don't wanna darken this, we'll just make our highlights and our exposure. So then we're gonna come in here and paint that into this area and make this area a little bit darker. I tend to not do that. If you have a blown out area in an image, you can see it's getting this weird like banding effect where it looks almost like a watercolor painting in the background. It looks fake and unreal. If you have an area that is overexposed or blown out, I would say just leave it like that. Don't try to darken it. It will just, what happens is it just grays it out and it ends up looking horrible. So in this case, what I want to do is I actually want to open or brighten this area up a little bit. And I don't want it to affect here because remember, we want her to basically be somewhat of a silhouette. I could even darken her a little bit if I wanted, but we got some actually good tonal values. So I think I'm going to keep that. So what we're going to do is just click this little button right here, and that's a reset. And I'm just going to be guessing when I make these first adjustments. We can come back in and fix them later. All right, so what do I want to do? I want to open up the highlights a little bit, and I want to open up my shadows and maybe my exposure just a teeny bit. Now look, this might be a little bit too much. I don't know. So I've made my brush pretty big because this is a pretty big area that I want here. I don't actually want to get this hay bale, so I'm not going to paint it. And it looks like it's a little bit too much. I'm actually going to try to stay away from there. And then we're just going to come in here. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to come down here and try to get this dog a little bit. All right. We'll do this. So it looks pretty good. We've evened that out. It got a little bit too bright, so I'm going to lower this a little bit too much. All right, that looks pretty good. We've got that applied where we've opened up this area. It's a little cyan in this. I could adjust the color as well if I wanted, but this is the problem. I didn't paint over the whole image, so I'm not going to adjust the color. Because notice we've got some daylight here where it's more of a normal color, but the shadow areas with the blue ones. If you wanted to fix the color, you could either make a separate adjustment or do this in Photoshop. And in my case, I think I'm going to do it in Photoshop. This looks pretty good. So we're going to come here and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to make some of those selective adjustments. So I'll reset that because it keeps it from the last time, even if you're on a different photo. So first thing that we've got is this dark area right here that we want to get rid of. So we're just going to darken that. So I'm going to bring my highlights and my exposure down, and I'm going to do a shift click. So I'm going to click once, go down to the end, hold shift click, and it draws a straight line and darkens that. And it got a little bit too dark, so we'll just lighten that up just a little bit. And so that's a quick way to make a perfectly straight line. And then we're going to come up here and hit plus, and then we're going to reset that. And basically we're going to open some areas up. So we'll open up that face a little bit. So to open up the face, we're going to open up the exposure and the shadows. And then we're just going to come in here and apply this. You could also do the color. It's got a little redness in her face. And as you open up a shadow, it's going to intensify that color. I'm just going to leave it so it's a subtle adjustment and be okay with that. And then we're going to come in here and do the horse. Now, if the horse needed a different adjustment than the face, and I'll just hit Command Z, you need to make a new adjustment. So, and that's usually a smart thing to do. So I think the horse needs to be a little bit brighter. So we'll come in here and we can just open this horse's face up a little bit. Notice we're not going to do it here or anywhere else in the thing, just in that area where it's getting bright. Now we're going to do the opposite. So I want to darken this back here, this car and this highlight, just because it's distracting in the image, and I want to kind of dumb it down. And then we're going to hold the highlight values here by painting into them. So another brush. Now look, notice how many one clicks we've had to do to get this image. And this is just in Adobe Camera Raw. We're not in Adobe Photoshop. This is good toning done intelligently. One click just doesn't work. Once again, we're going to reset this. And what do we want to do? So we're going to lower the contrast. Remember, when you're usually trying to darken something, you want to lower the contrast, then darken it. So we'll come in here, and I'll have to change the brush size. Look, if I was really doing this for me, I would go in here and zoom in and do a better job of this, but we want to save some time on the tutorial, and we'll probably just use the same adjustment here. We're just going to darken that in a little bit. All right, that looks a whole lot better. So that image has been toned. So then we can come into here and we can adjust this. Now it's a little dark here. I'm going to leave this like that. And we're going to come in and just make an adjustment once again in the face. So we're going to reset this. We're going to open it up. And then we'll just apply that to the horse just so it looks a little bit better. We're going to hit plus. We're going to hit reset. We're going to do the highlights, lower contrast. Click the wrong one. So we want shadows to go back to 0. All right. And then we're just darken that a little bit. Change that brush size. Constantly always need to change brush size in Photoshop. If you just leave one brush and try to do it, it's just not going to work good. All right, so that looks pretty good. It's a little bit yellow in here, and this person's a little bit dark, but I'm okay with that. So I could darken this area or dumb it down. It's a little contrasty, and that's what's making it super green. This green, because everything else is brown, really stands out. So I'm going to show you just a little trick here of how to deal with that. Once again, you're going to click a new brush. You're going to reset it. We're actually going to desaturate that a little bit. We're going to lower the contrast, and we're going to lower the highlights a little bit. We're going to go in here and paint this in. And if it isn't enough, we can definitely go back in Photoshop and do it. Remember, you can always come in here and further adjust. All right, that looks pretty good. So we've kind of dumbed that down. Now I'm going to just click this first image, click this last image with a shift click, and we selected all 3 images. I'm going to go ahead and hit open. This is going to open these as a 16-bit and to Photoshop. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice that I do a lot of toning in Adobe Camera Raw. It's really a smart way. Then I don't have to do quite as much in Photoshop. And I can use Photoshop in different areas that just it works better in. So now I'm going to make a series of more selective adjustments. So we've got layers palette here. We've got our adjustments here, and we've got the image. And then I don't really need to make global adjustments unless I mess something up, because I've already done that once. I've evened this photo out. So now I can kind of come in here and adjust this image so it looks good. So I want this to be the focal point of my area. You want this to have the most contrast and look the best. And maybe this area to be a little bit darker. So when this is darker, it kind of makes your eye trickle into this area, right? You don't want it bouncing back and forth. You want your eye in this image to kind of stay in this area. So what we can do is make a curves adjustment layer. I just work in curves, but you could use levels if you wanted. I just think curves work a whole lot better. And so we're just going to darken that. So I'm just looking at the area that I want to darken or increase the contrast, which is going to be over here. So we're just going to increase that a little bit too much. And I'm going to hit Command I, which is invert. It's just the way I do it. There's a couple different ways. Yes, you could make a selection to do the same thing. We're going to click on the brush. It's at 99%. That's pretty good. We'll make our brush bigger and softer. And then we're just going to apply that by hitting D. Now we've got the color white, and white will paint into that black mask and apply that adjustment. So if I turn this on and off, you can see it's applied that adjustment. I could fix that cyan color cast right now, but we're just going to leave it alone. I do want to darken this down just a little bit more. Once again, remember, I want to funnel the eye this way. And then we have this area right here. So right here, all I'm going to do is actually just increase the contrast a little bit. So I'm going to brighten my whites and click this way to increase the contrast, and Command I, just because it's quicker to do that. And then we can just kind of paint that into that one little area. It's a very subtle adjustment. It's just giving that area a little bit of pop. Now this area right here has a little bit of cyan cast to it. There's two different ways I could do this. One, I could go in here and adjust the color and take away the blue. But what happens in shadow areas of in photography a lot is, we get this weird cyan cast that doesn't exist. So we're going to go in, and I'm actually just going to desaturate cyan and blue. If you don't want to do this, there's no real other cyan or blue in this image. So I'm just getting rid of that oversaturation in this area. And so that looks a little bit better. And if I wanted to come in here and adjust the color, I could do that. I could do a color balance adjustment, which I don't really do a lot, or I could come in here. Actually, I think if I add a little bit of green, so going this way is adding green. And you got to be very subtle when you use curves. So you're going to come in here, and then once again, since I've already made this mask once, I don't have to do it again. But notice that I also added some other areas. So normally I would duplicate this mask, but since I don't want to apply it to the other areas, we'll just go ahead and paint that in. And so that's a really simple tone. I didn't do anything fancy or crazy in this image, and bam, that looks good. So we've got that one image, and we're going to go ahead and close that out. Go to the next image. And then we're going to do the exact same thing over and over and over again to each one of these different images until we've got this exactly how we want it. So we can go in and make those selective adjustments to those specific areas, because what I do in this image and what I do to this image are going to be completely different. So this image, because it has a lot of weird and lighting coming from here and here, it's going to require more different areas that I need to individually tackle versus this, which is pretty flat image. I've got this pretty much where I want. I just need to come in here and brighten this face, brighten this area up a little bit, and even out the color. In this image, I'm going to have this where it's got a little bit too much green in it. It's got some cyan cast here, and it's a little bit magenta here, though I'm okay with that magenta there, but it's got a lot of oversaturation yellow back here. And each one of those need to be tackled individually. So what all this shows us is that there is no such thing as one-click toning inside Adobe Photoshop. So what does this show us? That, yeah, one-click toning is just clickbait. So I'm going to try to keep an honest channel and show you guys how to actually tone inside of Adobe Photoshop. Keep posted. We'll get some new videos coming up here through the rest of January. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.